Good evening and welcome, especially if this is your very first time at St. Peter's, a very warm welcome to you. My name is Jared Stoller. I serve as the senior pastor here at St. Peter's, and where both George and Jack have been so important in the life of this community. We're gathered together, friends, colleagues, neighbors, readers of Jack's. We also have people from St. Peter's that are here this evening. What a great gift to be together to celebrate this extraordinary human being. This is a place where music, literature, poetry, and dance have long been at home. And so it was no surprise to me when one day, shortly around 2010, I can't exactly place the day, Jack knocked on my door and wondered if he might join this community. And in joining this community helped us to birth new expressions of poetry in this place and new expressions of dance that from decades ago came alive again. And it's a gift that we'll be able to share these together this evening. I'm mindful that when Jack first was in the hospital a number of months ago, George, you started to send out an email to, I think maybe the earliest of those emails had 2 or 3 or 4 of us on them. And as the days and the weeks and the months grew longer, that list grew longer. I think at its height, some 75 people were on your email distribution list, and to be gathered together with all of you this day, those people who are joining us online, it's a tribute not simply to Jack's legacy and you as well, George, but the love that is brought together through all of this. And I think that that too will come to the fore this evening. This night, as we share memories, as we share poetry, as we share dance, we have a chance to surround George, in fact, with our love, and to remember Jack with the things and the people and in this place that he loved so much. I invite you to stand for a brief prayer. Let us pray. O God of grace and glory, we remember before you today our brother Jack. We thank you for giving him to us to know and to love as a companion in our pilgrimage on earth. In your boundless compassion, console us and all who mourn. Give us faith to see that death has been swallowed up in the victory of life, so that we may live in confidence and hope until by your call, we too are gathered in your heavenly home. In your holy name we pray. Amen.
Unfortunately, Dick Lurie couldn't be here in person because of a family illness. Dick was one of the 4 founding editors of Hanging Loose, first as a magazine in 1966, and then a press, both of which are still flourishing. Hanging Loose was important to Jack, and over many years, its editors became valued friends. Dick has given us his comments in writing so that we can share them with you. 3 of Jack's poems were published in Hanging Loose #1 in 1966, when the magazine was literally hanging loose. Poems were on loose sheets of paper, tucked inside an envelope with the cover printed on it. And we've published 3 of Jack's last poems in numbers 113 and 114, our 2 most recent issues. In number 114, after he had passed away, we had a memorial page for Jack. In other words, Jack has been with us for the life of the magazine. In that 57-year span, more than 80 Jack Anderson poems appeared in Hanging Loose. Now I'm imagining Jack deciding to write a poem about calculating that if those poems were spaced out equally over 57 years, how often would one appear? And when it did, what restaurant would he be eating at? Jack wrote about his Midwest and the world at large, and everything from The Princess of Feet Above Sea Level in that first issue, to Fire Trucks Returning, issue number 38, Leather Bar, number 62, Sinkholes, number 106, or, if you're of a classical bent, The Home Life of the Bachs, number 108. Jack's poems were wry, witty, and maybe surprisingly, since it's not always paired with wit, they were gentle. And along with everything else, we thought that one of Jack's greatest gifts was his trademark deadpan approach, which reminded us sometimes of Jack Benny. I've chosen 3 of his poems to read. The first one is actually about stage performance, which was a rare subject for Jack, the combining of his 2 passions. And it's also a sweet reminder of his Midwest. It's from a 2006 issue of Hanging Loose. It's called Some Nights in Heaven.
Some nights in heaven. Some nights in heaven, with its many mansions, many theaters, these souls find themselves on the stage of a Gilbert and Sullivan society. There they are, cast as pirates in funny hats, policemen in funny hats, judges in funny wigs, tars in funny sailor suits, Japanese battle axes, maidens in nightgowns, wilting poets, corpulent fairies. There they all are, and they just have to giggle. It is all so much fun, just like the old days when they used to rehearse in the Grace Church basement. So happy to sing these tunes with high notes and funny words that twisted their tongues, and sometimes the pastor peeked in to smile at all this silly joy. Eternally theirs now. Some nights in heaven, before they find themselves, some other good nights on a stage in a ballet with swans.
For most poets, the third rail of our craft is poems about poetry. As a rule, they just don't seem to come across that well. But, of course, Jack was fearless. So here's this prose poem from Hanging Loose just last year. It's called Adventures in Lithuanian Poetry.
Adventures in Lithuanian Poetry. Don't you sometimes wake up in the morning and think, what I want, what I need today is some Lithuanian poetry? So you don't know any Lithuanian poetry. That doesn't matter. It's there. Lithuanian poetry is out there, and it's good to know Lithuanian poetry exists. There's poetry out there everywhere, and everywhere there is poetry, there must be poetry that's good. Just think of Lithuania. We've got to know more about Lithuanian poetry. Tonight, in Lithuania, yes, this very night, they must be reading poems aloud somewhere. That's got to be. That's the way things are in this world of poetry. There's a cellar, a cozy cellar, with tables, candles, and glasses of red wine, and people gathered, reading poems. Who wrote them? What do they say? How should I know? They're in Lithuanian, and I don't know a word of Lithuanian. But surely, they're about what poems everywhere are always about. And it makes me feel good to know that those poems are being read tonight in Lithuania, just as poems are being read in other places too. And someone in that Lithuanian cellar will surely soon stand up, I think, and read Bulgarian poetry. Translations from Bulgarian into Lithuanians of poems originally read one night in a cellar with wine and candles somewhere in Bulgaria. And those people hearing them now in Lithuania will wake up, as we all do, wanting, needing, hoping, hungry for more.
This third poem takes me back to Jack's Midwest, and it is a good example of his wit, his gentleness, and the fact that Jack could pretty much make anything interesting. And this, again, is from just last year, Deviled Eggs.
Deviled eggs. My mother was once Billy Strassner's heroine. She introduced him to deviled eggs. When a bunch of us neighborhood kids graduated from high school into college, well, most of us did, she and other mothers thought it would be a nice idea to throw a party for us kids. All the mothers brought stuff, good stuff, you know. Cold cuts, potato salad, coleslaw, those colored jellos with bits of fruit buried inside, and deviled eggs. My mother brought the deviled eggs. Billy Strassner came to that party. He told me he'd never tasted deviled eggs before. Mothers were the first he'd ever had. He just loved them, though, gobbling them up, wolfing them down. For we all knew about deviled eggs, all of us, but Billy Strassner. Billy was a jock, a hulk, a bit of a brawler who got into fights, yet could be good-hearted if you treated him right. He wouldn't go on to college with the rest of us, not him, not even on a football scholarship. And we all thought, you dumb Billy, how could you have lived so long without having had deviled eggs? But we just kept quiet, for he wasn't a bad kid, and my mother was his heroine. She introduced him to deviled eggs. I wonder what became of him, staying at home while the rest of us moved on. Did he ever have deviled eggs again? Oh, he must have. Everyone back then ate deviled eggs. And we all must have had them sometime for the first time. I know Billy Strassner did. I saw Mother introduce them to him, which made her Billy Strassner's heroine. And me, a buddy, he wouldn't pick a fight within any time soon.
And finally, Hanging Loose is proud also to have published 4 of Jack's books. Jack loved to travel, as his friends know. One of these books has a title that includes the word city, another country, another field trips, and the most recent, universe. We love Jack and we miss him.
Getting lost in a city like this. Getting lost is the first thing you find yourself doing here. You stand, getting lost, right in front of your front door. You wander another way and wonder upon wonder. You bump into yourself getting lost there once more. You discover no street parallels anything else here. Restaurants sink lost into stews of addresses. Facades circle squares and disappear lost, while strollers walk lost through rainstorms of architecture. Tram cars get lost, but slither past carefree. You ask, is this Prague? Or Paris? I'm lost. If you found your way yesterday, you didn't, you're still lost. For though you stare at the map stares back lost. From now on, you can never abandon being lost. So wherever you find yourself, you must love yourself lost.
Am I projecting enough? Okay. Dancing and poetry are alike in that both ask onlookers to make connections between what is literally present to the senses and what the onlooker's mind supplies. As Jack put the matter in a dialogue poem, Speaker 1, "But that pretty lady, why doesn't she have arms?" Speaker 2, "She's been deconstructed, you silly goose." Speaker 1, "Then where are her arms?" Speaker 2, they're all in your head. That's from The Truth of Myth, Getting Lost in a City Like This. Pondering the relationship between literature and dance by way of an early poem of Garcia Lorca's, whose English translation Jack had included in his outstanding anthology of poetry about dancing, scholars Joellen A. Meglin and Lynn Matlock Brooks, who's here today, co-authored this observation. In a 1972 issue of Dance Perspectives titled The Dance, the Dancer, and the Poem, an anthology of 20th century dance poems, poet and dance critic Jack Anderson proposed that the more these two mediums absorb of each other's attributes, the better the aesthetic results. In other words, Anderson particularly values poetry that gestures toward the concrete, physical, and embodied, and dancing that aspires to metaphysical planes. Joellen and Lynn, erstwhile co-editors of Dance Chronicle, the irreplaceable journal of dance historical scholarship that Jack and George had co-founded, published their provocative ideas about Jack's aesthetic preferences in a 2016 issue of the same periodical. Their observation has given me pause. I think they are really onto something. My slight addition being that the individual values or ideals they suggest Jack held for literature and dance are actually present together in each of his own poems, in poems he appreciated by others, and in many of the ballets and modern dances that fascinated him, although not always in the same way. In Jack's poetry collections of the 20th century, that's his own, these two defining values are often projected as the real, that is, the world of art and the imagination, and the quotidian. In these guises, they can provide the occasion for Jack's characteristically, I chose Buster Keaton type humor, but it's the same deadpan humor, as in these lines from Daily Luncheon Intention from that immortal collection, the first one I read of Jack's, The Invention of New Jersey. Every time the refrigerator opens, a pregnant woman falls out, and it is less discussed than the prize fights. Or they can launch a poem into anxious depths, as in these lines from the poem Late Music, Field Trips on the Rapid Transit. In the pleasure of a piano sonata and black coffee at midnight, I can taste the music, bitter, warm, alive, and rattling. It keeps me awake, awake in the real. Throughout his books, the subject of dancing provides delightful Easter egg imagery for Jack's fellow balletomanes. I found a few more poems than Dick Lowry on dance. In his poems directly about dance, though, the layers of irony can secrete a touch of the tragic, like the aftertaste of iron that sometimes accompanies a snowfall. Quote, "It is time for class. Ballet is a strict, rational, scientific system. It may deal with fantasies, yet it has no place for fancy. Fancy is unstable, but ballet is exact, unambiguous. Everything about it is clear and hard as the snow on which Taglioni danced. So take your places at the bar. the lesson begins. That's from The Mysterious Barricades or the Enchaînement of Memory from the book Traffic. In the later books, the poems become dialogues that seem to take place between the letter and the spirit, a philosophical prize fight that underpins Jack's contemplations of dance also, and where the letter, rather than the spirit, tends to win. All along, from the 1960s to the 20-teens, Jack's poetic lines are taking the subway, drinking coffee, peering at the sky, pleasuring in the city, puzzling out the exact moment of transcendence when the surreal superficialities of daily life step forward from their fancies to reveal themselves as the stripped-down real with a capital R. Hitler and then Hitler's daughter make appearances like movie stars. And yet, despite the hot comedy and cold ironies, there are, at least I can see, two constants. One, for the last 55 years or so, every book of Jack's poetry is dedicated to George, the muse who holds the world together. And Jack's voice is always reliably Jack's, thoughtful, clear as a good song lyric, unrolling in full sentences with the third person predominating, impeccably timed to unheard music, the voice of a grown-up who never lost the capacity to take pleasure in those absurdities that children so readily see. The little poem of Jack's that I'll close with is City Joys from his 1975 collection of the same name. In cities at night, you can sit in the luxury of a darkened room where objects become feelings in the shadows around you, and there is no more piano, no more plants, no more desk, and the only light is the light of the dial on the FM radio. You can sit at a table and look outside and watch the night like a movie, the traffic light changing, a late bus passing through the intersection, and how someone's window goes blank to be perfectly night. Now he comes home. His key is in the lock. He has closed the door behind him. He walks about some other room, then goes to the kitchen. He wants something to eat. He carries in a tray to the table where I'm sitting, still in the dark. On the tray are cups steaming with coffee, slices of coffee cake, and a book. He gives me the book. It is dark. I set it beside my cup. I touch his sweater. We kiss. We talk and we watch the traffic light change. We are eating the luxury of cake at night and talking, smiling, staring into the dark at Telegraph Hill, leading down toward the lakefront where cars on the outer drive sweep by like thoughts, and across the river, always present in its own light, shining through the dark, rises the Empire State Building, God.
The social contract. One night, while riding the London Underground, I watched a young man, accepting what looked like a friend's whispered dare, strip off his clothes and fold them up neatly until he was left with not a stitch on, except for the boots he'd had to remove for just a short time to get his jeans down. There he sat on his pile of clothes, buck naked, clean and muscular, and with a nice smile. All of us in that car gasped at first and stared, looking him over, some blushing, some brazen, then seeing he meant and would do no harm, we smiled back, his friends now, and friends of one another. And anytime anyone got on at a station, we turned in unison, waiting to see what would come next, only to relax when the stranger relaxed and became our new friend. Still, someone someplace must have complained to someone else there, for at one stop, a uniform appeared in the door and ordered the guy, but softly, politely, to put on his clothes, which he did with no fuss, and we went our own ways. Yet, while he was naked, we were joined together in sweet solidarity. It was all so innocent, so civilized, so good.
Good stage hands. Thank you. Right. Can everybody hear me? Okay, good. I know now you can see me. So, my name is Anna Kisselgoff, and I was chief dance critic at the New York Times, but I didn't start that way. And I was very well aware of Jack's writing on dance, and that's what George has asked me to talk about. So the first thing is I would like to give you a view of what Jack thought he was doing as a dance critic. And in the June 18, 2014 issue of Dance Chronicle, which he co-founded with George, he wrote, "Thoughts of a pluralist. I've always been a critical pluralist, someone perpetually curious about what's out there in today's dance world, what was out there in the past, and what might be out there in the future. I don't insist or even expect these manifestations to be similar, and I don't like them all. Nor do I expect all dance critics to react to them as I do. How dull that would be. Yet I'm glad dance is there in all its varieties to elicit its multitudinous critical responses." So in reading this, I realized that I believe in this too, and that's why when people constantly ask me, who was your favorite dancer? I don't know. I really don't. I know whom I like, but I can't give you the kind of response you want unless you have a pluralistic view. Now, I'm going to get around the time situation by giving you a collage of things that I found that Jack wrote, or that I would like to show you how enlightened he was as a critic. So what he doesn't like is, quote, "a preoccupation with technique, which has caused too many choreographers, especially in ballet, to ignore such aspects of dancing as characterization, period style, and geographic setting, with the result that their creations tend to look too much alike." So you know now where his heart is. He likes ballets that have period style and characterizations. I say, oh, who cares? You know, I don't care about characterization in dance. I'm more of a plotless type. So that doesn't matter, he's wrong. Then he explains along the way why Europeans like choreographers like Béjart, Neumeier, and Macmillan, who do full-length ballets. And he gives you an interesting comment. In Europe, he says, ballet is associated with opera. So people are used to seeing big productions. We often see one-act ballets, or we see something shorter. Now, before I forget to mention this, I want to say that some of the most brilliant writing on George Balanchine comes from Jack Anderson, and it's contained in his book, The One and Only Ballet Russe de Monte Carlo. I want to give you the pages. I want you to run to the library and read it. And I ain't kidding. I mean it. I reread it now, and I mean it. He was writing many years ago, before all the people who consider themselves the critic on Balanchine had even begun to see Balanchine. So I would suggest you read chapter 6, pages 117 to 127. And I'm not joking. Get it from the library, get it from Amazon, and read it. You will be startled. He reads a lot of other critics. He relies on Edwin Denby. And I won't tell you what Balanchine said about Edwin Denby. So, and I'm not kidding there either. So the point is that Jack is extremely enlightening on Balanchine. Now, before I also forget something I wanted to put in, one day, Jack, I was the chief critic, so I made the assignments, just as Clive Barnes, when he was chief critic, assigned us to do various performances to write on them, and unless you really said, I'm not going to review that character again, I quit, you had to go. So Jack wrote a review, and he didn't look kindly upon the avant-garde young composer who created the music for that performance. It was in a downtown space, and the composer wrote back saying that he was going to shoot Jack. So I called up the director of that space and I said, what does this mean? And he said, oh, Anna, it's just downtown posturing. So I said, well, tell him to stop posturing or I'll see you in court. And I really think that we have had serious threats. Like opera fans, ballet fans can be extremely serious about what you would like to do. And I'm friend, colleague from the Times is here, so I'm not divulging a total secret, but there is a special security person at the Times who deals with these threats. But I didn't feel that a guy who was just downtown posturing should be reported, and I'm sure you agree. Since then, he has become a better-known composer, and he's grown up, apparently. So, I am very glad that dark elegies will be represented on this program by solo, because another thing I want to read to show you how Jack, just keep in mind, if you're writing for a newspaper or the equivalent, you're not writing 4,000 words for the New Yorker. You have to meet deadlines. You have to be edited by 3 people who will undo what you do, and then you have to undo what they did if you want to preserve your reputation. And that is why I would like to put in, read what Jack wrote about dark elegies. Okay, so in November 6, 2006, he wrote about American Ballet Theater's production of Anthony Tudor's Ritual of Mourning, as he called it, mourning, M-O-U-R-N-I-N-G, and Kurt Yossi's famous anti-war ballet, The Green Table. This is Jack writing. Both dark elegies, and you will see something today from dark elegies, and Yossi's Green Table focus on serious issues. Yoss shows a war, yet never tells us what the war was about. War is inherently terrible, he implies. Dark Elegies presents the aftermath of a disaster without indicating the nature of the disaster. Although the texts of the music, Mahler's songs, concern a family tragedy, Tudor goes beyond private grief to depict communal mourning. But what has occasioned it? And so he gives you the context. And as he says, as is well known, that when this ballet was first done in England, people who had seen it and who had been affected, as Jack says, like disasters at sea or mine collapses, which happened in Wales very often, or a factory fire, he said that the people who saw the ballet said that Dark Elegies evokes all such situations, making local events universal. Good idea. Your own personal experience translated into the universal. Like Yoss, Tudor honors and pities people struggling in terrible times. We live in such times, No wonder elegies and the Green Table have such a lasting impact. This was written by Jack in 2006, and we still live in terrible times. So I want to say that his analysis in a very short review gets to the point of the ballet and about things like this in general. Last, what he doesn't like. A preoccupation with technique, which has caused too many choreographers, especially in ballet, to ignore such aspect. I read this, of dancing as characterization, period style, and choreographic setting, with the result that their creations look alike. Well, in my view, I think that Jack preferred things that had characterization, and as I said, I prefer something else, but I never felt that I was reading somebody who was hostile to what I liked, and I think that his generosity as a critic is something that should be remembered. Thank you.
Tonight only. The bright marquee of a movie theater in Elmira, maybe? Or in Springfield, Fargo, or Chippewa Falls, in one of those towns, or another one similar. A movie marquee shining at nightfall, not for a picture show, but for something else, something special. On stage tonight, one night only, Ballet Russe de Monte Carlo. This one night, this sign can proclaim, on stage tonight, Ballet Russe. And how many nights passed and how many years before the lights went out? First for Ballet Russe, then for any other special thing, and then at last for the movies, flickering away with no one to watch them. And when was there nothing left for anyone to come to? Or that dark street in that dark district?
Fiesta's end. Seen from the rattling lurch of this bus, a village in Peru, just before nightfall, a fiesta's end surely, skies smeared with glower, a few lighted windows crouched close to the ground. A bunch of men fumbling to piss against a wall and falling down, dead drunk in the dirt. The pissy dirt. A few women struggling to prop them back up. The mountain air gone sour. Bus clattering past into the past. This glimpse becomes changeless. All stays as it is. Most of these revelers, dead long ago, now.
gegangen und werden jetzt nach Hause gelangen. Oh, sei nicht bang, der Tag ist schön, sie machen nur den Gang zu jenen Höhen. Sie sind uns nur vorausgegangen und werden nicht wieder nach Haus verlangen. Wir heulen sie ein auf jenen Höhen im Sonnenschein. Der Tag ist schön auf jenen Höhen.
One of the joys of living in the city, and especially in New York, is the chance encounter. One afternoon just before Christmas, I was browsing a used bookstore in Lower Manhattan and had a chance encounter with a 1973 edition of a journal called Field, published out of Oberlin College. I started flipping through the table of contents: Margaret Atwood, Philip Levine, Donald Hall, a translation of Rilke, and Jack Anderson. Jack's poem, Listening for the Mailman, was in this journal. Listening for the Mailman. 1. Here, yes, in this room. No, not in that. Here, yes, in this room. No, not in that. 2. They listened to music in the garden. The music came from a radio inside. It came out through the windows and into the garden. It might have come from across the lake. They would sit in the garden and listen to music. When they were done, it was dark. That was the evening. 3. They're in Connecticut. 3. Again. 4 sounds: a clock, a refrigerator, the sawing of wood, a chair being dragged across the floor upstairs. 4 sounds. 2 are from my room. 3 continue. 1 has stopped. It could be the clock. It could be the refrigerator. It could be the saw. It could be the chair. 4. This is the stillness of listening for the mailman. The mailman hasn't come yet. The sunlight is everywhere. When the mailman comes, metal boxes will sigh. He will touch metal boxes with the rattle of keys. The doors of the boxes are heavy and slow. The mailman stoops beneath the weight of his bag. Nothing hurries. The sunlight is everywhere. 5. As long as you do not open the envelope, there still remains hope. The perfect rhyme sleeps in the unread book. 6. I saw B in the street yesterday. She didn't recognize me after so many years. I wanted to follow her to know where she was going. I followed her to the traffic light and then I got scared. I would like to follow an absolute stranger. I would like to follow a stranger all day. Would he notice me? If he noticed me, what would he say? Sometimes I would like to be invisible. Sometimes I would like to change my name so that whenever someone who knew me said hello, I could say, "Sorry, you must mean somebody else." 7. This is the mailman now. The mailman is here. Someone plays scales on an upstairs piano. The piano is in the room with a chair. It is a room I hear but never see. 8. To open this letter is to bite into fruit. 10. I leave a gap. I continue. This was the morning. 11. Here, here, yes, in this room. No, no, not in that. Here, here, yes, in this room. No, no, not in that.
Reason enough. For me to open our apartment door just before 10 on this cold, rainy night and hear some jolly French operetta I can't name bubbling from all the speakers while you perch balanced high on a ladder, arranging CDs on the topmost shelf, is to find myself in the midst of warmth. Reason enough for me to kiss you, murmur a few words, and then rush off to my room and begin to write all of this down.
I first met Jack through his writing. It was his intelligent critiques of New York theater ballet that first drew me to him. Jack had a way with words that always made me think. Whether the review is positive or negative, his writing made me consider the repertory I chose, reflect on how the dancers approached the work, and rethink how I coached. Because of Jack's abundant knowledge and appreciation of seemingly every style of dance, both past and present, East and West, and because of the absolute truthfulness and clarity of his writing, I trusted him. I soon read everything he wrote. I didn't always agree with him, but when I read the article a second or third time, I nearly always ended up agreeing with him. He saw and understood dance as both a standalone piece of art in the here and now, and as a work of art within the long and rich history of dance. Everyone who read Jack's writing learned something important. Some of my favorite article titles of his are There's Beauty in All This Mess, An Olympics of Spirit at the Battery Dance Festival, my favorite, Footwork with Fury, and Exploding in Unison. Jack possessed an engaging imagination and facility with words that perfectly captured performances. He also wrote moving obituaries of some of the most well-known dance artists of the 20th century, including, and this is just to name a few, Alicia Alonso, Igor Moiseev, Frederick Franklin, Murray Lewis, Maria Tallchief, and Sally Wilson. He had the gift of distilling what made each individual special and unique, and of encapsulating their spirit. Jack was unassuming, but omnipresent, and he played an invaluable role in the dance world. When Jack and I became friends, what touched me most about him was his devoted and loving relationship with his husband, George. When the three of us had dinner or just greeted each other in the theater, When I saw how they looked at each other and behaved with such adoration and trust, I would just melt. They made me believe that real, true love exists in the world. In the obituaries that Jack wrote, he always gave the final word to the person about whom he was writing. And I'd like to do the same here with a poem Jack wrote in 1976 called The Gods. Now, I know I'm supposed to be talking about dancing, but I just adore this poem. And I think it captures how rare and wonderful Jack was and describes the influence he had on so many of us. We love you, Jack, and we will miss you, but you will always live in our hearts. The Gods. Though they, too, descend upon another world, they are not like angels. Angels are people you've never met before, who yet bring messages which change your life. Angels are strangers bumping into you. The gods come in the form of people you know. They are the people you know at their fullest power. They have such power over you, they guide you onward to some splendor or chaos you've never dreamt of, but which is there and yours, all yours. The gods never seem strange until after they've gone, when you see around you only people you know, and you know then those people by themselves could not have brought you so far.
He Lives Among Us by Jack Anderson. Elvis lives. He walks with us, he talks with us, he is always there. He has a farm in Wisconsin, a grocery in Seattle. He is a barfly in the Bronx, a bum who sleeps on cardboard over gratings. He's in the chorus at the Met, a faith healer in Kentucky. He used to be a Baptist, but now he's Jewish. He's a graduate student at Yale, an aide in the stacks at the Library of Congress. He works selling popcorn in the multiplex at the mall. He's shacking up with a floozy on the outskirts of Detroit. He's having an affair with James Dean at their Texas ranch. He goes around in drag. He's made himself into a Native American, renamed himself J. Turquoise Tall Tree. He's lost weight, gotten skinny, his hair's falling out. He's bald as an egg. He's grown a long beard. He stands in line on Tuesdays at your bank. He's in look-alike contests everywhere and never wins a one. But seek him out. You'll find him. He's alive and well, is hidden yet among us, now and forevermore. Amen.
I'm going to go a little bit off script. I want to say on behalf of all of us who got to know Jack because of Voices, that it is a real honor to give voice to his. Forgive mine. But I met Jack as Wayne and I were putting it together, and he came in, and I'm sitting at the table, and he said, "Young lady, would you help me sell my books?" And I said, "Of course." So I sat there and took money, and that's how I met Jack. And he was our star, and he always will be, and we hope to do something for him at our next Voices. Grace on Sunday. Passing down this street, we pass as if through stained glass, the lights of this air. Here is grace undeserved, but ours now. All the hours after church, or lunch, or love, or sleep. When light comes resplendent, the sun spreading wide, the street aglow, with people out strolling, babies in carriages, dogs on leashes, taking on new colors, the brightness of going, of presences passing this way, down blocks of amazement and into radiance, passing into radiance, always.
The dog at 4:45. Every afternoon, at 4:45 exactly, the dog would hurry, but not with undue haste, into the living room, plant its front paws on the sill of the living room window, and, without showing any signs of excitement, stare out the window before dropping down and, apparently satisfied, trotting off. The dog began doing this shortly after we got it, and it's kept on doing this ever since. We've never figured out why the dog does this or what it sees outside that keeps it doing this. Yet every day at 4:45, the dog posts itself at the window and looks out. At last, we got so curious that we joined the dog at 4:45 and looked out with it, trying to see what the dog saw. But we saw nothing unusual outside, no special hubbub in the street, or recurrent passing cars, pedestrians, or other beasts. "Why do you keep doing this?" we asked the dog. It never answered. But what could we expect? It was only a dog after all. Yet it kept standing at the living room window, and we, now determined to figure things out once and for all, joined it there day after day at 4:45, moving our chairs into place beside it. This has now become such a regular and treasured part of our day that we take drinks and snacks to the sill and have cocktail hour with the dog there, enjoying it looking out. Often, we even feed it a cookie. We all have such a good time. And that's the kind of time we always had with Jack. Thank you so much.
Sorry for all of this. My glasses are caught in my coat. Michael.
You got yourself piled up here. Here you go.
I'm George Doris, Jack's partner for 58 years. First of all, I want to thank Pastor Stoller and the wonderful St. Peter's community and all of you who've made this loving celebration possible. And of course, I want to thank you all for being here. But above all, thank you, Michael and Eric. Without you, this wouldn't have happened. When we started thinking about the poems to read for this celebration, I suggested 50, an unpublished poem Jack wrote for the 50th anniversary of our meeting, February 12th, 1965. We decided instead to print it in the program so you can enjoy the elegance of its invention and structure, qualities I find typical of his poetry. I hope you like it as much as I do. I'm not going to go into any detail about Jack's and my life together, what Oscar Wilde called washing your clean linen in public. But before I read the truth about Fluffy, I'd like to say that many of our best talks together were when I was preparing dinner and Jack, whose kitchen abilities were limited to boiling water for instant coffee, would sit nearby with a drink and we'd talk. Over the years, we would talk about his books on dance history, A Concise History of Ballet and Modern Dance, The Ballet Russe de Monte Carlo, The Development of Modern Dance as an International Art, and the American Dance Festival. And he would help me with Dance Chronicle, the journal of dance history that we co-edited, but was basically my responsibility. Poetry was something else, entirely his. Much as he loved dance, he always considered himself a poet first, and I only saw his poems when they were published. However, I did help proofread his collections of poems, and in an emergency, I even typed one of them onto a floppy disk. Remember floppy disks? And now, the truth about Fluffy. What did you do with those tuna fish scraps? I thought I'd add them to the salad for dinner. Sorry about that. I fed them to the cat. Cat? What cat? Our cat, of course. What other cat would you be talking about? But we don't have a cat. Yes, we do. Fluffy. Fluffy. You know, Fluffy. What's the matter with you? What's the matter with me? What's the matter with you, of all things, dreaming up a cat and calling it Fluffy? Fluffy's no dream. Maybe you're the one who's dreaming. Maybe you'd better wake up. Wake up from what? And into what? The real world, of course, the world with Fluffy in it. But there isn't any Fluffy. How can you be sure? After all, I did set out the tuna fish for Fluffy, didn't I? And if Fluffy didn't eat it, who did? Jack's father's parents, who died before Jack was born, came from Norway, from Stavanger. When Jack and I lived in London on my sabbatical in 1970-71, his parents planned to visit us and then go on to Norway. But something came up and they never did. It was after our return that Jack wrote this poem, Going to Norway. I asked my parents, have you ever thought of going to Norway? You are Andersons and deserve to know Norway, where we all began. Do you not wonder how things are in Norway? I know that I wonder. And my parents said, yes, we shall go to Norway. We are Andersons and want to see where our people began. We are growing old. We must go now. Yet they stayed on the dock staring at the water as ship after ship sailed toward the north, toward Norway. So I said to my parents, now, you must leave now. These are the boats that are leaving for Norway. It is not long or far. Then my parents said, yes, we want to see Norway. We are Andersons, but it is so far. They stayed where they were, watching the boats leave for Norway and trying to picture it, even testing a few words of that dear language on their tongue. but standing still, never moving, never climbing aboard, though I kept pleading, "Please now, you must leave now if you want to see Norway." "Norway," they murmured. "Norway? Ah, where is that?" They stood very still. Grayness crept through their hair. It frightened me to see them growing so old, for I had not thought such a thing possible. At last I said, "I must go to Norway. I'm an Anderson and want to know where all of us began. I must go now." They stood on the dock, waving out at the water, and I waved back over the water, which darkened between us with distance and tears. In the 1970s, Jack did quite a bit of traveling to see dance companies around the country. He adjudicated 2 conferences for the National Association of Regional Ballet, choosing ballets for their festival programs. Later, he saw more companies when he was on the dance panel of the announced National Endowment for the Arts. Many of them, whether in cities or small towns, were built by former dancers from companies around the world, some bringing ballet to places that had never seen it before, except perhaps a visit by the Ballet Russe to Monte Carlo on a one-night stand. This became the basis for his poem, "A Gift to the Plains," which you will now hear him read in a recording made by the dance historian Marion Smith as part of a tribute to her own teacher. Are we ready for the...
Jack Anderson, reading my poem, A Gift to the Plains. This couple, they chose to settle down here on the plains. No one knew why. They danced in New York, in London, in Paris, in Rome, Barcelona, and Buenos Aires. Now it was time for their dancing to stop. So they came out here, to this town on the plains. No one knew why. They didn't quite either, but something called them across the map to settle here, in this of all towns, and open their little academy of ballet. Here is where something told them to stay. So they stayed, this couple, year after year, years stretching onward into decades, years teaching ballet in their school, to which students came, girls giggling in pink, plus a few brave, inquisitive boys, to have their lives touched by ballet, and by more than ballet, by what these teachers had known, had lived in New York, London, Vienna, and Brussels, a gift of grace bestowed on the plains. Teaching there all these years, they civilized squirming and energized torpor, until every leg raised an arabesque extended beyond the city limits. What was that town? Who were those teachers? It's possible you know, or maybe you don't. You might not even recognize their names, or you might know ones like them, for there are other ones like them scattered out there, gifts to the plains, in other plains towns, to which somehow lives were called and gifts were given. No one knows why, but this did happen, and grace remains grace.
Never seen it. Yeah, so